The first cities. If you could travel back more than 5,000 years and stand on the vast land where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow side by side, you would witness an extraordinary sight. In the middle of a dry desert, small groups of people were turning earth and water into life. The sound of shovels striking mud, voices calling as logs were moved, and rushing water pouring through freshly dug canals. It was more than the sound of labor. It was the first echo of civilization. This land was never easy to live in. The rivers could be calm and nurturing like a mother, yet, at other times, they rose in anger, flooding and destroying everything in their path. But it was precisely this harshness that taught the people here to resist fate. They stopped waiting for the rain and fearing the floods. They learned to control them. Every canal, every dam they built was not only for irrigation, but also a declaration of faith that humans could shape their own destiny. This land was Mesopotamia, the first cradle of human civilization. Located in the eastern part of the Fertile Crescent, where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, Mesopotamia had rich alluvial soil, but an unforgiving climate and unpredictable weather. Around 10,000 years ago, it witnessed the Neolithic Revolution, when people first began farming, domesticating animals, and settling down instead of hunting and gathering. Small villages appeared along the riverbanks, and for the first time, humanity produced more food than it needed. This surplus opened the door to something far greater, the birth of cities. By around 3,500 BCE, in the southern region of Sumer, these villages had grown into true urban centers. Uruk, the first city in human history, rose with massive walls and a population of nearly 50,000, an astonishing number for that time. Other centers, such as Eridu, Lagash, Kish, and Ur, soon followed, forming a network of independent city-states. Each city-state was both a community and a small nation, with its own territory, army, patron deity, and governing system. Yet between them, conflicts began to emerge over water, farmland, and control of irrigation systems. From the struggle for survival, the world's first systems of governance began to take shape. At first, temple priests managed agricultural production and distributed food. But as populations grew and irrigation projects expanded, power gradually shifted to those who could organize and lead, the first kings. From this change came the earliest governments, complete with laws, taxes, and labor obligations. Society began to divide: nobles, priests, soldiers, artisans, farmers, and slaves. At the heart of each city rose temples and palaces, symbols of both spiritual devotion and political authority. The Sumerians, the people of Mesopotamia, were not only skilled builders, but also brilliant innovators. They created cuneiform writing, the earliest known system of symbols etched onto clay tablets to record goods, laws, and transactions. They built towering ziggurats, multi-tiered brick temples that honored their gods and represented humanity's reach toward the heavens. They invented the wheel, refined the plow and irrigation systems, developed a calendar, introduced base 60 mathematics, and wrote some of the world's first legal codes, the foundation for later laws like Hammurabi's. But every civilization has its price. As humans learned ownership, they also learned conflict. The Sumerian city-states often fought over water and power. Centuries of farming eventually led to soil salinization, reducing crop yields. A reminder that progress without sustainability can bring decline. Though Sumer shone brilliantly, it eventually gave way to new empires: Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria, all of which inherited and expanded Mesopotamia's great legacy. Today, Mesopotamia is more than an ancient land buried beneath time. It is where humanity first turned nature into a tool, community into organization, and chaos into order. From flooded fields to the first bricks of Uruk, from cuneiform tablets to the laws of Ur-Nammu, it all tells the same story. Civilization was not born from ease, but from struggle, ambition, and intellect. Mesopotamia was not just the land between two rivers. It was the place where, between nature and humanity, a fragile balance was first achieved, marking the beginning of humanity's greatest journey, the journey to build, to create, and to forever redefine what it means to be human. Mesopotamia, and the rise of summer. More than 5,000 years ago, in a dry but fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, something extraordinary happened. From small riverside villages, people began to work together to master their harsh environment, digging canals, building levees, and guiding water into their fields, turning desert into lush farmland. It wasn't just the birth of agriculture. It was the first time humanity learned to shape nature itself. And from those first seeds, a new civilization emerged: Sumer, the first known civilization in human history. This land, Mesopotamia, meaning the land between two rivers, became the cradle of history. Here, people achieved what no one had done before. They built cities, invented writing, established governments, and even imagined the concept of kingship. Once free from the constant struggle for survival, they had time to dream of gods who ruled the skies and of men who ruled the earth. While farmers worked the fields, priests prayed to the gods, potters shaped clay, and a small class of record-keepers and leaders rose to organize society. From their hands came some of humanity's first great ideas: laws, property, taxes, and war. One of the earliest great cities was Uruk, home to over 40,000 people, around 3,200 BCE. At its center stood a monumental mud brick structure reaching toward the heavens, a ziggurat, the mountain of the gods, where the Sumerians believed their deities resided. No one dared climb to the top, but everyone paid taxes to sustain it. It was both a symbol of faith and a display of human power and organization. And at its base, something equally revolutionary was born: writing. The Sumerians carved wedge-shaped marks, known as cuneiform, onto clay tablets to record grain supplies, labor, and trade. Over time, those marks evolved into language, the world's first written script. With writing, they could now record laws, contracts, prayers, and stories. Among those stories was the Epic of Gilgamesh, the tale of the king of Uruk, who sought the secret of immortality, a story inscribed on clay more than 4,000 years ago, yet still alive today. The Sumerians were not only thinkers, they were inventors. They created the wheel, the sailboat, and the base 60 counting system, which gave us 24-hour days and 60-minute hours. They established one of the first known law codes, the Code of Ur-Nammu, and divided the world into 360 degrees, laying the groundwork for mathematics, measurement, and astronomy. From a land of unpredictable floods and shifting sands, they built the foundations upon which all later civilizations would stand. But like every great story, Sumer's brilliance did not last forever. As the city-states grew wealthier and stronger, ambition followed. Wars broke out over water, land, and glory, weakening the once flourishing region. Finally, around 2334 BCE, Sargon of Akkad conquered Sumer and united Mesopotamia under the world's first empire. The Sumerians lost their independence, but not their legacy. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians who followed all borrowed from Sumer, its language, religion, and systems of law and governance, continuing the story their predecessors had begun. The Sumerian civilization was the opening chapter of humanity's story. From humble farmers who once battled the floods of two mighty rivers, they gave birth to law, art, mathematics, architecture, and even our understanding of time itself. They taught the world a timeless truth. Every civilization begins with the effort to bring order out of chaos, whether in nature or within ourselves. And it was there, between the Tigris and Euphrates, that humankind first achieved the impossible, turning nature into an ally and imagination into reality. Inventing the wheel and writing. More than 5,000 years ago, when people still lived in small city-states along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, two inventions forever changed the course of human history. In the ancient land of Mesopotamia, the cradle of Sumerian civilization, two seemingly simple ideas would go on to define the destiny of humankind: the wheel and writing. While potters spun their clay on round tables, they had no idea that this steady rotation would one day launch the age of mechanical movement. And in another corner of a temple, a tax collector pressed small marks into wet clay to record the day's grain collection. unaware that he was laying the foundation for humanity's first written system. By the 4th millennium BCE, the Mesopotamian plains were both harsh and fertile. The soil was rich, but the scorching heat and unpredictable floods forced people to adapt creatively in order to survive. Lacking wood, metal, and stone, the Sumerians turned to the most abundant resource around them: clay. They built homes, made bricks and pottery, and eventually used it to write. In bustling city-states like Uruk and Ur, irrigation farming flourished, and trade became so complex that memory alone could no longer manage it. Humanity needed a way to record and remember, and so writing was born. At the same time, the Sumerians faced another practical challenge: how to move heavy goods across muddy plains. In one pottery workshop, a craftsman seeking a faster way to shape clay invented the potter's wheel. It didn't take long for someone to realize that this same principle could be turned upright, attached to an axle, and used for transport. Thus, the world's first wheel was created. By around 3500 BCE, the wheel was first used for pottery, then quickly adapted for wagons and carts, the first mechanical vehicles in history. The earliest wheels were solid and heavy, carved from thick planks of wood. Later, lighter spoked wheels appeared, making travel faster and smoother. The Sumerians used these wheeled carts to move crops, building materials, and eventually created two-wheeled chariots that transformed the way wars were fought. Around the same time, the world's first writing system emerged. The Sumerians began by pressing simple pictograms, drawings of oxen, grain, or jars, into soft clay tablets to track goods stored in temple warehouses. As society grew more complex, these symbols evolved into abstract wedge-shaped marks made with a reed stylus. This script, known as cuneiform, developed into a full written language with hundreds of characters, capable of recording contracts, laws, and even stories about the human spirit. These two inventions completely reshaped Sumerian life. The wheel liberated human labor, making it easier to transport harvests and materials, boosting productivity and expanding trade. It also sparked a revolution in craftsmanship. Potters could now mass-produce identical vessels to store food and offerings. Writing, meanwhile, revolutionized the human mind. Knowledge no longer vanished with memory. It could now be passed from one generation to the next. Kings and officials used writing to manage taxes, record property, and maintain order. Those who mastered reading and writing, the scribes, became a respected and powerful class, forming the backbone of the first bureaucratic systems in human history. The influence of the wheel and writing spread far beyond Sumer. The wheel became the foundation for transport, agriculture, and much later, industrial machinery. Its circular motion, the rotation of the axle, became the guiding principle for every mechanical system, from water wheels to steam engines. Writing, meanwhile, ushered humanity into the age of recorded history. It allowed people to preserve laws, beliefs, and discoveries, laying the groundwork for education and science. Other writing systems, from Egyptian hieroglyphs to Chinese script and the Phoenician alphabet, were all inspired by that same fundamental idea: to capture spoken language in lasting symbols. More than 5 millennia later, the wheel still turns on every road, and writing still carries our thoughts across pages and screens. Two inventions, one born to move, the other to remember, together lifted humanity from prehistory into civilization. The Sumerians may have vanished long ago, but the spin of their wheels and the marks of their cuneiform tablets continue to shape our world, reminding us that the greatest ideas often begin from the simplest human needs: to work more easily and to remember more clearly. The world first stories. When humans invented writing, the silent world of hundreds of thousands of years suddenly found its voice. At first, wedge-shaped marks were used only to record barley, goats, or taxes. Simple, practical numbers pressed into soft clay. But then, something extraordinary happened. People began to tell stories. Those rough carvings turned into songs, into tales of gods and kings, and into expressions of fear, wonder, and hope. From that moment on, history was no longer written only in stone or bone, but in words, capable of touching the human heart. Among those first stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh stands out as the spark that ignited human literature. Written nearly 4,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, it tells the story of Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, a man so powerful he dared to challenge the gods, only to be humbled by the inevitability of death. His journey to find the secret of immortality mirrors humanity's oldest fear, the fear of being forgotten. What makes this story remarkable is not just its age, but its timeless truth. A hero who conquers all, yet learns that the only kind of immortality lies in the legacy we leave behind. Around the same time, another voice emerged, not that of a warrior or a king, but of a woman. Her name was Enheduanna, daughter of King Sargon of Akkad and high priestess of the city of Ur, living around 2300 BCE. Inside her temple, she composed hymns to the goddess Inanna, the first known poems in human history with a confirmed author. Enheduanna did more than pray, she created. In a world dominated by men and war, she used writing to express emotion, to capture belief, and to define identity. Through her words, Enheduanna became the first recorded writer in history, centuries before Homer's name would ever be known. Together, Gilgamesh and Enheduanna represent a turning point for humankind, the moment when language rose beyond trade and record-keeping to reach the soul. The clay tablets of Mesopotamia held not only numbers and goods, but also thoughts, dreams, and faith. From them, literature was born, as humanity's answer to oblivion. When Gilgamesh realized that only fame could make him eternal, and when Enheduanna pressed her name into clay to ensure she would be remembered, they were both sending the same message across time. We live on through the stories we tell. Even after 4,000 years, we can still read Enheduanna's poetry and still recognize ourselves in the loneliness of Gilgamesh. Their words remind us of the eternal power of writing, the tool that allowed humankind to defy time itself, ensuring that the first voices of our species continue to echo through the human mind to this very day. Cities and wars. When the first cities rose in Mesopotamia, they stood not only as symbols of progress, but also as the birthplace of conflict. As humans learned to farm, store grain, craft tools, and create jewelry, they also gave rise to something new, desire. And as history would prove, wherever there is wealth, there will be struggle. Around 4,500 years ago, between the Sumerian city-states of Lagash and Umma in southern Mesopotamia, a war broke out not over a throne or treasure, but over something far simpler, water. In a land where rain was scarce, the irrigation canals that fed the fields meant survival itself. Whoever controlled the water, controlled the crops, and the fate of their city. It began with a single shared canal. Lagash claimed it had been built by their ancestors, and thus belonged to them, while Umma insisted they had equal rights to its flow. What started as a boundary dispute soon escalated into open warfare, one of the first recorded conflicts in human history. The soldiers of that time carried bronze-tipped spears, wore leather armor, and rode four-wheeled carts pulled by donkeys. They did not fight for glory or empire, but for barley fields and irrigation ditches. In their thirst for water and for power, these Sumerians created something the world had never seen before: organized war. Lagash eventually emerged victorious under King Eonatum, who had his triumph carved into the stele of the vultures, the world's earliest known war monument. The stone records the aftermath of battle, describing the fallen soldiers of Umma lying across the fields, with vultures circling above. Eonatum declared that the god of war, Ningirsu, had granted Lagash victory and forced Umma to swear before the gods never to cross the border again. But peace was short-lived. The rulers who came after broke the oath, and blood once again flowed through the canals. Generations of war turned the fertile delta into a landscape scarred by conflict. When King Lugalzagasi of Umma rose to power, the balance shifted. He invaded and conquered Lagash, destroying its temples and leveling the city to the ground. Yet, in a twist of fate, the conqueror himself was soon defeated by Sargon of Akkad, who went on to create the world's first empire. The war between Lagash and Umma, born from a dispute over water, became the prelude to something much larger, the birth of imperial rule, where countless small wars were united under a single dominion. Looking back, Lagash and Umma marked the dawn of a new human era, an age of states, borders, laws, and organized warfare. They also left behind the first artistic and historical records of battle, stone inscriptions, carved reliefs, and cuneiform accounts etched into clay. But beneath it all lies a timeless lesson. Once humanity learned to build walls, accumulate wealth, and claim ownership, it also learned to fight, to defend, or to take. In many ways, the history of every civilization that followed can be seen as a different version of that very first conflict. A struggle for the canal that divided Lagash and Umma, Egypt and the pyramids. While the city-states of Mesopotamia were still arguing over canals and barley fields, far to the west, along the banks of the Nile, another civilization quietly rose, one far more stable and enduring, ancient Egypt. The Nile River, with its predictable floods and fertile silt, provided a rhythm of life as steady as time itself. Each year, the river's waters renewed the land, allowing farmers to sow and harvest without fear of famine. Grateful to the gods who had done their part, the Egyptians flourished in peace and prosperity. Out of that stability grew a kingdom so powerful and so confident that its rulers, the pharaohs regarded as living gods, began to dream of building something that would last forever, great pyramids that reached toward the heavens. Around 4,500 years ago, while most of the world still lived in mud huts and used stone tools, the Egyptians built the Great Pyramid of Giza, a monumental tomb constructed from 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, fitted so precisely that even a sheet of paper could barely slip between them. Built for Pharaoh Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, around 2580 BCE, it once stood more than 146 meters tall, about the height of a 50-story building. Without wheels or machines, relying only on human hands, they created a wonder that 45 centuries later still defies comprehension. Contrary to popular myth, the pyramid builders were not enslaved laborers driven by whips, but skilled, seasonal workers. During the annual Nile floods, when farmland was submerged, thousands of farmers traveled to the construction sites. They were fed, housed, treated by physicians, and most importantly, they believed they were serving a divine purpose. Each stone was hauled by hand, up slick ramps moistened with water, set into place with both precision and devotion. In return, they were paid with bread and beer, the everyday staples of Egyptian life, and many had their names inscribed near the pharaoh's burial site. They likely never imagined that the monument they helped raise would become the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. For the Egyptians, a pyramid was far more than a tomb. It was a gateway to eternity. They believed the pharaoh's soul would ascend its steps to join the sun god Ra in the afterlife. Its pointed shape, reaching toward the sky, symbolized rebirth and immortality. To the rulers themselves, each pyramid was a statement carved in stone, proof of divine authority and unmatched power. Only a god-king could command tens of thousands of workers to move mountains of stone and build an artificial peak in the heart of the desert. Yet beneath those perfect layers of limestone lies a deeply human story, one of intelligence, persistence, and fear. The pharaohs believed in eternal life, yet they also feared being forgotten. That fear drove them to build higher and grander monuments, hoping to secure their place in eternity. But over time, their great tombs became victims of their own splendor. Their size and wealth made them irresistible to tomb raiders, who looted the treasures once meant to accompany kings into the next world. Learning from this, later pharaohs abandoned pyramid building altogether, choosing instead to conceal their tombs in the Valley of the Kings, hidden among cliffs and sands, safe from human greed. Even so, the pyramids left behind an everlasting legacy. They stand as monuments to the scientific and engineering brilliance of the ancient world. Their nearly perfect alignment with true north and the precise geometry of their proportions, some scholars note that the ratio between the pyramid's perimeter and height closely approximates the value of pi, reveal an understanding of mathematics far ahead of its time. Culturally, the pyramids symbolize humanity's timeless desire to reach upward, to transcend mortality, and create something eternal through sheer will and intellect. Today, the pyramids of Giza still rise above the desert, their massive stones defying time itself. They remind us that while kingdoms may fall and rulers fade, the creations of human hands can endure. From the calm flow of the Nile to the stone steps that seem to touch the sky, the pyramids remain a living testament to what humanity can achieve when intellect, faith, and unity come together. Proof that even the desert can bow before human determination. Indus Valley Civilization. While Egypt built pyramids to honor its kings, and Mesopotamia raised towering temples to praise its gods, far to the east, along the Indus River, another civilization chose to express its greatness in a very different way through plumbing. That's right. While much of the ancient world still struggled with mud and chaos, the people of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro lived in homes with private bathrooms, clean water wells, and underground drainage systems running beneath their streets. It was not merely an engineering marvel, it was a quiet declaration that comfort, order, and hygiene could stand equal to power and faith. Around 4,500 years ago, while the pharaohs were building pyramids and the Sumerians were carving cuneiform into clay, the inhabitants of the Indus Valley were laying out cities on a perfect grid. Straight roads intersected at right angles, houses were built with uniform baked bricks, and the drainage network was so advanced that modern engineers still marvel at it today. At the heart of each city stood public buildings, granaries, wells, and, most famously, the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, a large pool sealed with bitumen, where people likely performed ritual cleansings of both body and spirit. Yet what truly sets the Indus civilization apart is what it lacked. There were no grand palaces, no colossal statues, no monuments shouting the name of a ruler or god, no pharaohs, no ziggurats, only rows of modest, well-built homes, clean streets, and silent sewers working seamlessly below. It was as if the people believed that discipline, equality, and cleanliness were themselves the purest expressions of civilization. The people of the Indus Valley did not seek glory through extravagance. Instead, they left behind small, beautifully carved seals featuring bulls, elephants, and tigers, each marked with mysterious symbols that have yet to be deciphered. We know they were intelligent, organized, and skilled craftsmen, but we still do not know what language they spoke, what stories they told, or which gods they worshipped. That silence makes the Indus Valley one of the most fascinating enigmas of the ancient world, a society both advanced and humble, mysterious yet enduring. Perhaps that is what makes them truly remarkable. While other civilizations carved their names into stone to be remembered, the Indus people left behind order, cleanliness, and quiet sophistication, values that may seem ordinary, yet remain the foundation of every modern city today. Fragile. While the city-states of Mesopotamia were still locked in endless local wars, one man from Akkad had a daring idea. If one could rule a single city, why not rule them all? Around 2300 BCE, Sargon of Akkad, a man of humble origins but extraordinary military skill and vision, conquered southern Sumer and then expanded his control across Mesopotamia, founding what is widely considered the first empire in human history. Under his leadership, the once fragmented city-states were unified for the first time. Trade flourished. Writing was used to manage taxes and administration, and clay tablets circulated between cities, like the express mail of the ancient world. But like every great empire that followed, Akkad could not escape the cycle of rise and fall. After more than a century of prosperity, nature turned against it. The rains stopped, rivers dried up, and farmland cracked under relentless drought. Crops failed, famine spread, and people abandoned their cities. And as hunger grew, loyalty faded. Subject regions rebelled, seeking independence, and the empire that had once symbolized order collapsed within decades. The Akkadians called this the Curse of Akkad, believing the gods had punished their king for his pride. Yet the story of Akkad did not end with its downfall. The empire left behind an enduring legacy. It pioneered centralized government, laid the groundwork for the ancient Semitic languages, and set the stage for the legal traditions that would later culminate in Hammurabi's Code. The Akkadians also created stunning works of art, such as the bronze head of Sargon, its calm yet commanding expression, symbolizing an age when humanity first learned to shape the world through organization and vision. History remembers Akkad not just as the first empire, but as the first great lesson. Even the mightiest civilizations can crumble when nature changes, and when humanity refuses to change with it. A lesson written 4,000 years ago, yet one that still echoes with relevance today.